5 teacher unions, together with these school governing body associations, have voiced their support for tomorrow's reopening of schools. However, they have reiterated that no school will reopen unless it's COVID-19 compliant. They also seem to be satisfied with some of the progress that the department has made. We're joined by Confidence Dikgole from the Independent Schools Association of South Africa. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time. Firstly, speak to us about how independent schools have been affected by this delay in the reopening. We know that not all schools necessarily, that the calendar is directly in line with what's happening with the public schools.
Thank you so much, Cathy, and good evening to you and your listeners, and viewers also. So basically, Cathy, what I can confirm is that independent schools were really not that much affected by the shifting of dates from the 1st of June to the 8th of June, because as the minister said earlier this evening, that the president had declared 1st of June as the date for reopening of schools. So most of the independent schools went ahead and reopened their schools on the 1st of June. But I must emphasize that independent schools that were able to open their schools on the 1st of June were schools that were compliant with all the required COVID-19 health and safety protocols. So those were able to go ahead and reopen their schools on the 1st of June.
You've had a week to assess just the system and look at the interventions that different schools have put in place. What are your findings and just your general assessment coming from this past week?
Okay, look, and I must say we have not at this point been able to collect all data coming from all our member schools, but most of the schools that opened on the 1st of June have been in position to continue with the teaching and learning. Of course, it's not business as usual. We're talking about the new normal now, as everybody refers to it. But schools have been able to get learners into class and to proceed with teaching and learning, of course, with a few obstacles here and there. And I think you may have heard the HOD, rather the MEC of Gauteng, Mr. Lessufi, saying that in Gauteng, there are 30 schools that were not, or that will not be ready to reopen, and 4 of those are independent schools that have had confirmed cases of COVID-19. So those are the challenges that some of those schools will have experienced. But apart from that, schools were able to start reopen on the 1st, and majority of them were monitored either by Provincial Department of Education officials, or by officials from the DBE, or officials from the Health Department, or any other relevant authorities. And so they were given a green light to go ahead with the reopening of their schools, apart from small little challenges that I have referred to just now.
What are the kind of concerns that you've had to deal with, specifically from parents, and to what extent have you been able to be transparent with those parents so that they have confidence when they send their children to school?
And I think the minister touched on this earlier on in her briefing. Concerns that parents would normally raise have schools put in place all the measures that they need to have put in place regarding to ensure safety of their learners. And these would be things around screening of learners and anybody else who may want to come through the gates or entrances of any of our schools, screening to ensure that they are able to pick up if anybody displays any signs or possible signs of COVID-19. We've had to ensure and reassure parents that this has happened, screening, and also making sure that throughout the day learners comply with the required social distancing, and that masks are worn throughout the day. That's very critical, so as to ensure that learners are not put at risk in terms of the possible infection of the COVID-19 virus.
Do you have a sense
those are the
yet?
Things that
Sure.
we've had to...
Sure. Do you have a sense yet, sorry to interrupt you there, do you have a sense yet of the rate of return of the learners?
I must say we do not have the exact sense of the rate of return, but I need to point out here that even before lockdown, most of our schools continued with online or remote learning. So school has sort of been continuing even under the strict measures of lockdown. And so in those schools where for instance, there are cases of COVID-19 that have been detected, schools will then go back to continue with remote learning. But in terms of numbers of learners that have returned to school, it's not easy to say at this point, because, as I say, we do have that hybrid where some schools have reopened completely for teaching and learning to happen face-to-face, whereas there are those that have opted to continue with hybrid approach of online and remote, and those that have opted to go for remote completely at this stage.
So, I think before I let you go, let's talk about the protocol that schools are following once you know that a teacher there has tested positive, and has, at this point, have any of the learners been affected too?
Just repeat your question, please, Cathy.
So the protocol that the schools follow once they have a positive case of COVID-19 on their grounds, what happens? And do you know yet if any of the learners of these schools have also been affected by these positive cases?
Okay, so the protocol that our member schools follow is the protocol that has been outlined by the Department of Basic Education in their directions that were published on the 27th of May, I think it was, a Friday, a week ago, and amended on the 2nd of June. The protocols are very clear. The directions are very clear in terms of protocol that should be followed, that the relevant officials must be alerted to such incidents of cases that the schools may pick up. And so some of our schools that we have spoken to actually complied with the required protocol. They alerted the relevant health officials, and so learners were then isolated in line with the isolation protocols that have been put in place. Look, as I say, we do not have the exact figures in terms of how many of our schools have been affected, but those that spoke to us confirmed and assured us that they alerted the relevant health officials, and they then immediately went into necessary isolation protocols. Some of our schools have even had to close down completely because it was not only learners that were affected, but educators as well.